All right. I would say, why don't we get started? Once again, welcome to our webinar, how to ensure successful S/4HANA transformations and migrations using Signavio and LeanIX. Before we start, I would like to introduce our speakers today. Myself, Jan Thomas van Utzen. I'm a consultant with our professional services team here at LeanIX, and are focusing on any SAP topics within LeanIX, and also focusing on business transformation management. And we're helping our customers to thrive within their EA practices. And I'm very glad also to welcome JP from Signavio. JP, why don't you introduce?
Hi, Antonas. Thrilled to be here today. So a big thank you to the entire LeanIX team for inviting Signavio to co-present this webinar. So my name is JP. I'm a big fan of both business process management and enterprise architecture. And also I'm definitely a big believer of the synergy between these two disciplines. So I'm an ecosystem evangelist and solution architect. So concretely, I'm working with both technology and consulting partners to build end-to-end solutions. So a big thank you for those who join, and really looking forward to dive into the live demonstration in a bit.
Thanks a lot, JP. And so am I. I think we have some great content prepared, and just to give you a sneak preview, we won't spend too much time on slides, but rather have a very detailed and in-depth walkthrough of our storyline using Signavio and LeanIX. So what do we want to talk about today, and why does it make sense to talk about Signavio and LeanIX in the context of SAP S/4HANA transformations? So we want to touch on that at the beginning, really highlighting the key challenges that we see during S/4HANA transformations. We want to give you a brief overview of our continuous end-to-end transformation process using LeanIX and Signavio, and then straightforward jump into our live demo and give you the opportunity to get a better understanding of our approach. And then at the end, some key takeaways, and of course, a Q&A session. So if you have any questions during the meeting, feel free to shoot them into our direction using the Q&A section. We'll make sure to address them at the end. All right. So talking about SAP S/4HANA transformation, I think every one of you have seen these challenges or similar challenges. What we see is that customers, or a lot of customers, 70%, if we're talking about numbers, are still waiting to move on in their journey with SAP, because many questions pop up at the beginning. What kind of migration strategy do you want to follow? Is it more system conversion? Is it a new implementation or even a selective approach that you want to follow? Do you want to have one system or multiple systems? What kind of rollout do you want to implement? So really coming up with an answer to these questions, you have to be, or you face numerous challenges. For example, enabling enterprise-wide collaboration. You need to know who to involve, what kind of stakeholder groups do you have. You need to transform a landscape, which is highly complex. SAP systems are really at the heart of your landscape, having interfaces to numerous systems, business processes running from A to B. And if you want to make sure everything is working at the end, you need a holistic approach. Monitoring projects in progress and dependencies to other projects to see, okay, maybe there are other projects currently running which are also touching on this specific process or applications. And before you commit on a deadline, before you commit on resources, a plan, you need to be aware of the dependencies. And in the end, you need to have a 360-degree view over your landscape to really become and go from your as-is landscape to intelligent enterprise. But how do you get there? From our perspective, we see some key dimensions, key elements that you need to consider when moving from your legacy landscape to SAP S/4HANA. So from our perspective, this includes people. Who are the stakeholder groups we need to involve? Who are the owner of business processes? Who are the business and technical owners of applications, business capabilities, IT components, and so on and so on. We have processes, processes that really build up on your business, that give you some cutting edge advantage over your competitors. We have capabilities, business capabilities, which give you more a strategic view on your company. We have certain data objects, which are very important in such transformations. We have applications, we have SAP and non-SAP applications you need to consider. And then again, of course, what kind of technology are you running on? And as you can see, people and process are really elements that we see within Signavio. And then we have capabilities, data, application, technology, which are coming from LeanIX. And this is why we think a holistic approach is really important. You cannot only look into business processes when transforming your enterprise. You have to look into processes, capabilities, data, application, technology, and people, and really connecting the dots and connecting the data that you have is giving you an advantage in your transformation. So why do we think this is a powerful approach? Well, we have a lot of customers who already build on it. So from the LeanIX perspective, we have Bosch, Beiersdorf, and some other big companies who use LeanIX, and also from Signavio sides. But JP, why don't you give us a bit more insights? What kind of customers you have and what kind of use cases you guys are already leveraging Signavio for SAP S/4HANA transformations?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I must admit that the use case, right, ERP transformation, and namely ECC to S/4HANA is something very popular for years, right, actually with Signavio, where people are actually embracing Signavio as a transformation engine, or like an end-to-end process transformation engine, to make sure that they understand where they are, they build the target states, and actually use the platform as a catalyst for change. So this is something that we do for years, and I'm very thrilled to have the opportunity to showcase this within, the ecosystem of LeanIX transformation as well. So I think it will be quite interesting. But just prior to dive into the agenda and the demonstration, there is something I wanted to highlight here. And if you can just switch to the next slide. Just wanted to highlight the fact that SAP has been using Signavio for years, right? And the love story between SAP and Signavio has started a while before the acquisition. It actually started with a strategic transformation focusing on customer experience. So the Signavio platform became quickly the SAP Process Excellence platform. So the original approach was really focusing on people and processes, right? And with the transformation that have become more and more complex, and we are living into a fast evolving context, the SAP Global Transformation Office have actually extended the scope. So if you switch to the next slide, JT, we move from process excellence, really focusing on people and process, and we extended that SAP this approach to include data, system, different deliverables, being able to link that to opportunities, and that's what we call the 4D map methodology. And I thought it was quite interesting to showcase this, because even at SAP internally, we are extending the concept to make sure we create synergies between business process management and enterprise architecture. So now together, we're going to see that in the concept of S/4HANA migration. So on the next slide here, that's going to help us to set the scene for the live demonstration. So we like to call the concept of end-to-end traceability. So the concept is we're going to start within LeanIX to get a 360 view, an holistic approach. And based on the outcome of the strategic planning exercise, we'll be able to understand where we need to invest and why. That will actually translate So the why per se is going to translate into different transformation initiatives, right? So that's where we call the how. So we can have transformation initiatives that are totally independent or intertwined. But the very key important thing to understand is whatever the transformation we are operating, in this case, S/4HANA migration, is going to be stored into one unique extended repository. So what you see at the bottom of the pyramid is just to make sure that, like a Deming circle, anything that we do, we actually capitalize on it. And we have the ability to secure any success, but also failure, to make sure we learn from the experience and we get the full impact from the strategy to the execution. So an important point is during this demonstration, we're going to do something very top-down, right? But we can also support a full bottom-up approach or even hybrid approach, right? So that's going to be the agenda of the demonstration. And now I'm going to hand it over to JT, who's going to speak a little bit about how the repository is built prior to dive into the live demo. JT, all yours.
All right, thank you, JP, and thanks for highlighting the approach. So before we jump into the demo, just very briefly, I want to highlight here again, I think we have seen the different elements that are relevant for a transformation. Just want to highlight here again the integration between LeanIX and Signavio. So it's an out-of-the-box integration, and really all you need is more or less your password and as your password and your user for your Signavio account. And then we have a bi-directional sync between LeanIX and Signavio for applications, business capabilities, and processes. So that's really all you need. And in terms of efforts, it doesn't take you longer than 5 minutes to set it up. So without further ado, I would like to jump into the live demo and give you a bit of context how we see that LeanIX and Signavio jointly can be used for SAP S/4HANA transformations. So give me 1 second to bring up my screen. All right, there we go. So we'll find ourselves now here in LeanIX on a dashboard where we would like to start the journey from a high-level perspective, maybe from a C-level perspective, maybe from an SAP Center of Excellence executive perspective. So before you start your journey, you come across numerous strategic questions as outlined earlier. So what kind of migration strategy you want to follow, what kind of rollout approach you might consider, what kind of systems you want to migrate, which you might not migrate. And now we want to focus on the question, what is the best migration strategy for your company? And what we do here now is we're looking into 2 different scenarios. We call them transformation items within LeanIX, which allow you to design and model different ways and paths to your desired target state, and also give you the ability to project different states within your application landscape, your business capability landscape and map, but also how does this affect certain interfaces, for example, and processes. So what we see here now is that we have 2 different scenarios, one for new implementation and one for a system conversion approach. And we divided these approaches into different work streams, which give you a brief overview and a very simplified overview of the underlying projects that you need to consider when moving from SAP ERP to SAP S/4HANA or SAP S/4HANA Cloud. So what we see here now is an overview of how much effort and risk is included with this specific project. We see an overall effort for the entire scenario here on the very top. And this gives us, it gives you a bit of feeling, okay, how much effort do I need to put in to make either one scenario or the other scenario and bring it to life. So as a next step, you probably have a first understanding now of your approach or of the different options that you have. And now you want to see it in the context of the business capability from a strategic perspective. What we see here is now that the business capability map for this specific company is divided using the Gartner Pace layout approach. That means that we specified and classified our business capabilities into 3 different groups. Commodity, which should be or should make up of 70% of our capabilities. So rather standardized capabilities that that the company is offering. We have capabilities that qualify themselves as differentiation. So really including unique processes, unique capabilities that you offer internally and externally. And then 10% focusing on innovative capabilities that you want to offer. And this really gives you a first idea, maybe where you want to spend more effort, more time and money during the conversion, during your transformation, and where you might be good with sticking to SAP standard processes. And then again, we additionally also see here the current maturity of a specific business capability and the target maturity. And bringing in the maturity state of the business capability allows you to also see this in the context of a migration strategy. For example, the bigger the gaps are within a specific capability, and the more you have, the bigger the case is for a new implementation, where you really start from scratch, from a green field, and where you'll be able to redesign all your different processes. And we can already see we have a lot of innovative business capabilities. We have some rather big gaps. So this might be an indicator to rather pursue a new implementation approach. But then again, we need more information. You also need to be aware, how does this whole transformation and the different scenarios that I have, how does this fit with my overall strategy? And here we have a high-level overview of our objectives, which are strategic objectives of your company. And we can see that we want to deliver excellence in a digital world until 2030. And we have 3 sub-objectives that need to be worked on in order to achieve our overall objective. And we can see that these 3 sub-objectives are supported by mostly all of our scenarios. But reducing IT complexity is only supported by scenario 1, the new implementation. Why is that? If I'm sticking to a system conversion approach, I'm more or less taking all my processes with me, and this is not really helping in terms of IT complexity. So having a new implementation approach rather pays into reducing IT complexity, processes, systems, and so on and so on. Okay, now if we jump on, we have here a high-level overview of our target landscape for scenario 1, where we can see, okay, 2025, what is changing? We can see that we sunset SAP FICO and introduce SAP S/4HANA Cloud Finance for accounting and billing. The same we can see for accounting and billing here for scenario 2. But here we're adding SAP S/4HANA Finance and not the cloud version. So, and this is really giving you the ability to show different states, different plans and scenarios and their impact on your landscape. Some more detailed information will follow in a bit. And then again, another very important key aspect is, of course, a holistic view on the integration architecture. What kind of interfaces do you currently have? How are SAP and non-SAP systems are interlinked? And what kind of information data is going through your interfaces? And from a high-level perspective, the more interfaces you have, the bigger the case for a system conversion approach and not for a new implementation. But as we can see here, our SAP systems or SAP landscape is rather simple. So this is another indicator for a new mutation approach. So if we now summarize all the different findings that we have, so a big maturity gap, some innovative capabilities that we want to work on, a very simplified or simple integration architecture, then we come to the conclusion that a new implementation approach might be the best way to go. Okay, so now that we decided on our migration strategy, we'll jump a bit into the future and see how someone, rather from the project perspective, would look and use LeanIX in the context of an SAP S/4HANA transformation. So first of all, you want to have a brief overview of your project. You want to see how different work streams span over time. You probably want to see what kind of different dependencies you have. And this is where our transformation roadmap comes into play. We can see that we have different work streams, for example, on finance, on HR, on production logistics. But then again, the way how you name it, the way how you structure them is totally up to you and your project. And now that we decided on a new implementation approach, we can see that each of these work streams have an innovation project where we really set the focus on re-engineering processes. Once that is finished, we start the actual migration, and then we have some rollout and cutover phases divided geographically into Europe and rest of the world. And what you see here as well is some interdependencies between this project and this project. And this is where you can see, okay, that's something where I need to act, where I need to involve the respective transformation owners, project owners, and discuss some mitigation measures. And then again, you could just change your project here as well. All right. Okay, now that we have a high-level overview of our landscape, our transformation roadmap, maybe we want to start with our first project on the finance innovation project. And here we want to really go and see, okay, where does it make sense to start? And as you can see, we have some innovative capabilities that we want to work on, and that it might make sense to start with these. For example, credit management. So this will be the example that we will start in a second. But before we do that, I want to highlight the target application landscape once more. So we have already seen that one on the other dashboard. But now if we jump into this specific report, what you can do additionally is really see how's my landscape evolving? What does my landscape at the beginning of 2023 look like? How does it look like in 2024? And we can see that different applications are edited. We can see that some applications go to end of life. But maybe we also want to see what exactly is changing compared from today to let's say, the beginning of 2025. And just simply by clicking Shift and the future state, you can see how your landscape is changing. So this is really some very cool feature that I wanted to share. And now that we jump back and look into credit management, which is the first capability where we really want to drill into and see what different processes do we might have. And if we look at this specific capability, we can see, okay, we have two different applications using this capability. We have SAP FICO, SAP SD that support this specific capability, but we can also see we have different processes, a credit management as is, and a credit management process, which is currently in the plan phase that we're working on. And now that we want to start and really dig into the current process, we can open it and we see it's linked to Signavio. We can also see a description that's coming from Signavio. We can see a process diagram also linked and synchronized from Signavio. And we have some metrics on the average cost, process variance, and the average cycle time, which JP will give you some more details on in a second. And now that you identified the processes that you want to work on, I'm handing over to JP.
Thanks a lot, JP.
Yeah.
Perfect. So let me share my screen. Thanks a lot. So while the screen is loading, just to make it clear, so now we've set the scene. So it means that we know what's going to be our migration strategy. We know where we need to spend time to actually make a difference. So we decided to start with credit management. And as you saw, we have this connection between LeanIX and Signavio to exchange information. So that actually helped us to get the traceability between the project roadmap, the strategy, and now what you see on the screen, which is a much more process-driven approach, right? So here you've got a wheel, which is called our integrated wheel, that goes from defining scope, assessing the as-is, build the to-be, etc. So we're going to go through this wheel all together, right? So the very first thing to start with is just to mirror, in a certain extent, exactly what JT showed to you. So before we were speaking about capability maps or maturity, etc. So now we're going to drill down into a value chain, right? So within this value chain, we're going to have, a couple of high-level processes, right? Especially focusing on order to cash. So everything that you see here is actually stored into the repository. And if we want to focus on credit management, well, the very first thing that you see is actually looks like is in pretty bad shape, right? Our credit management, when you click on the indicator, you look at a couple of KPIs, such as the number of variants to run my credit management, the cycle time, and also the cost, right? So all that are actually good insight for us to push the concept that we need to solve that. Maybe it's a high priority to migrate this credit management to move from the brand new platform. So we have collected this information. Now what we want is we want to double click on credit management to go through all the wheel, right? To being able to understand exactly what's going on with this process. So here, the very first thing I would like to hammer home and insist on is this concept of here, when I click on credit management, as you can see, you've got a couple of artifacts that are coming from LeanIX. So I want to insist that LeanIX is a master of data for a couple of artifacts that we decided. So namely IT systems, so that you can see here that we've got SAP ERP, SAP FICO, and SD, right? But you also have the very important mapping with the capability, right? So that's just to make sure everything is linked, right? So now if we drill down into our credit management as is, right? Actually, what is the situation? So usually what we do is we start with this concept of what we call process reference diagram. So see this as the process documentation and the type of information people are going to use internally to train and enable their people. So that's how we think the process is executed today, right? But the most important thing, and that's one of the key differentiators of Signavio, is to bring together process mining and business process management. So it means that now, attached to this process reference diagram, we can attach the process mining analytics. So for those who are not familiar with process mining, the concept is that we actually analyze the transaction of the system, right? So here in this specific case, we use our out-of-the-box connector to plug to SAP ECC to analyze, the data, right? That analyze the facts. So forget about opinion, forget about guesswork, right? Here we are analyzing the event logs, and we have the ability to retrieve this information in this type of outcome. So this is a very, very popular type of outcome of process mining, which is actually the discovery, right? So nobody has built this diagram manually. It has been actually executed directly from the process mining exercise. And the very first view is what we call the happy path. So in other words, is what is the most popular way to execute my credit management today? So that's interesting, but what's more interesting, right, is being able, because we've got 47 different process variants, is we don't know what we don't know. So we're gonna bit by bit look at the different variants, etc., to see where we've got loops, where we've got rework, where we've got bypass and non-conformance, because that's exactly where we want to spend our time to fix this process, right? So the idea here is that beyond the end-to-end process discovery, we have some contextual information that help us to bring, how many variants that we have today, what is the cycle time, what is the cost. So that's going to help us to understand exactly what the situation is. And I do insist is based on facts, right? Not based on opinion. So now the natural next step, because Signavio is bringing process mining and BPM together, we can actually juxtapose these two views to start a discussion internally. Say, guys, on the background, you see our process reference diagram, and in red, you see by process variants, how it is executed. And that will help us very quickly to highlight where we actually are not following the best practices. And that will help us to make the point, say, guys, on the strategy side, we saw that credit management is something we need to migrate as soon as possible. But even on the operation today, we see that there is something bad happening with this process. So the other step after you have started analyzing how it is working today, you want to drill down into the different variants. So that's called the variant manager that will help you to isolate and identify different variants to execute your credit management process, And here in this specific example, I'm going to take maybe 60% of my cases, right? So most of my cases within credit management is going to be captured into these 6 variants. And here is a very interesting transition from Signavio. You can leverage a process mining work and translate that back to the BPM work. So here, by double-clicking here on Generate BPMN, that's going to take this design and translate that into a fully actionable BPMN diagram. And that's where, if you will, we bridge the gap between a process MRI that comes from process mining to actually the real design work to act, right? So here you've got the design of your current state, right? And once again, not based on workshop, not based on interviews, that's based on process mining. So that's based on real data. So you are now into the process manager platform of Signavio. So you can create a new version, you can augment your diagram, etc. But more importantly, you can do something very common, especially when you do an S4 Hana migration, is you want to compare how you do today versus some best practices. And as you know, best practices of SAP are very, very well documented, right? So here's the concept is to compare what you see on the left-hand side, which is your current state, with a diagram on the right-hand side, which is your best practices. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick and choose as part of my demonstration here. I should have something called best practices credit management, right? And I do insist these best practices can come from SAP best practices library. They can come from your preferred consulting partners who has developed some industry prints or blueprints, if you will. And that can even be a blend of these two, right? You need actually to compare with something that talks to you. So here you see, and I'm not a credit management expert, but what you can see is when you compare your current state with some best practices, there is a big part of it, which with S/4HANA, which is automated. So everything which is related to request a credit rating or credit score, it is something which is not done manually today. If you move with S/4HANA, and that's exactly where we want to make our point. So if I summarize a little bit where we are now, is we have identified, where we need to invest and how we are doing. We did use process mining to understand what the current state of this process. We translate the process mining into BPM and work. We have compared, right, our process with some best practices. And once again, I do insist these best practices can come from SAP directly. Now, in order to move forward, we need to simulate our different cases. And that's where we bring the simulation.
No, she said 10:30.
So here we've got our process simulation, and the ability within the Signavio platform is to create as many scenarios as you want. So here, obviously, we're going to use the concept of digital twins, where we're going to run a first simulation with the normal way, which is a manual way, to see what's going to be the cost, the cycle time, and so on. And we're going to use now a new scenario that's going to actually embrace the automation of credit management that is provided by S/4HANA Finance. So now I'm going to run this new simulation. And what is quite interesting is that you can stack all the results close together. So that will help you to detect very quickly, where you've got gaps in terms of cost, cycle time, resource consumption, you name it. Very easy to do, right? And you can build as many as you want. So usually people are doing a mix between, hey, what if I double down my number of resources? What if I try to automate this and this, right? So that will help you to, once again, manipulate facts to create your business case. Everything you simulate is something you can export into an Excel spreadsheet. That will ultimately help you to build a case, and this is a case that you want to present and socialize to your different teams, right? So this is something very important for both LeanIX and Signavio. We really put people at the center of the transformation. And we've got this capability of being able to offer a preview, which is just to make sure that we can share the ideal target for us based on the different simulation and so on. And people can engage with this potential target, not only to consume what's going to be the target state, but also being able to comment. We give a voice to people. They can really brainstorm, they can give their feedback, etc. Just to make sure we are proactive regarding the change, because it's definitely not only a technology migration, right? This is something that will involve a change in the process, in people, and the way we operate. So as soon as we are comfortable with what's going to be our target date, we get the buy-in from the different teams, the natural next step for us is definitely to do something special, which is trigger what we call an opportunity assessment. And that's really where, once again, we're going to connect back to LeanIX, because here we can say, okay, I've got an opportunity to improve my credit management. I did my homework, I collected some information, I ran some simulation. Now I want to make sure I submit this case. And you can use our governance workflow within Signavio to say, oh, I've got a project for credit management. I confirm that this project of credit management is linked to the transformation item that JT showed you before, right? That's where we connect the dots between the roadmap and this opportunity. You can pick and choose different criteria that's going to define, the impact of this new credit management. You can pick and choose a different system here. So I'm just going to take finance and sales. You can drag and drop your simulation outcome, and you just submit your case. And that's going to be sent to the right level of authority to make sure that we are on track and that corresponds to our investment strategy. Just want to make one comment here. You can change all these criteria to decide whether or not it's a go or a no-go, which make you becoming very agile within your transformation, right? So maybe the first quarter, you're going to be very aggressive. Maybe the last quarter, you just want to change these rules. So as soon as we have submitted this, let me fast forward here. The idea is being able to now run this transformation. Let's assume we've got the green light and we move forward. So there is something that we have not talked about so far, is this concept that Signavio has a bi-directional connector with Solution Manager. So when we were mentioning the end-to-end traceability, that's a real end-to-end traceability, moving from strategy, capability, program and project, process. And as soon as we have all these business requirements, we can actually push them to solution manager. So that actually bridge the gap between business people to IT people that's going to run, build, and test the new implementation. And this is bi-directional, so it means that we can push information to solution manager, but we can also retrieve information from solution manager to Signavio, especially the transaction that are actually stored into dictionary items, the process steps, and so on, right? So we've got this back and forth between, LeanIX, Signavio, Solution Manager, and come back from Solution Manager, Signavio, and LeanIX, and that's exactly how we're gonna finish this round of Signavio. Is as soon as everything has been implemented, obviously what we want to do is to come back, and this time we've got our post-implementation, right? So we've got new systems that are there, still associated to the same capability, so no surprise here. And when we engage with our business architecture here, this time when you look at credit management, which is now our post transformation diagram, you obviously get a new KPI, which is showing you that now you no longer have 47 type of variants, etc. So the situation is way better, right? So with that, that's my way to actually close the transformation, which is very process-centric, and lead it back to JT to make sure that now we can see the impact on the overall architecture.
All right, thanks a lot, JP, for that very powerful demonstration. And now, if you allow me, I would like to show you how this loops back into LeanIX. And as JP already showed, now that he has created like a first design of the credit management process, and for the sake of simplicity, we now only look at the design and not the actual implementation. We can see that this process, the credit management process post-transformation, is also linked to Signavio. We can see the final process diagram again, and also see what kind of different projects are impacting this specific process. You can see we have our business process reengineering, where we really iterate through the steps that JP just showed, and we can see the actual implementation of that specific application and when it's planned, or when the execution is planned. Now, let's say we finished the design and we're good to go with the first version that we want to implement. We can jump into that specific project, which is documenting any of the planned changes. And now that we see, okay, this is the project, and now we want to execute because the design is ready, we're good to go. We want to document this automatically within LeanIX to have really our end-to-end vision from business capability, process, process design, application, IT component, and so on. So all we have to do now is prepare execution. And now we only want to focus on the credit management process. And you can see here already, it already has been executed. So what we did was putting this into phase-in with the execution. And all you had to do, if it were working, is just simply hit execute. And then you could see here on the fact sheet that the lifecycle changed to your specified lifecycle state. And you can see who actually did the execution. So now that we finished this specific part, you might consider, okay, how do I go from here? What is the next focus area that I want to pursue? And JP already mentioned it. Now that we covered credit management, we want to look into order fulfillment. And this is really where the whole cycle that JP just showed would start all over again. And this brings me, let's say, to our final words for this presentation. And therefore, I'm bringing up the presentation again. So now that we covered our live demo. We have seen how our end-to-end approach looks like. I want to reiterate once more on the approach that we see here, which is more of a high-level cycle that you go through from what kind of objectives am I following? How does my transformation, my SAP transformation, pay into this? What kind of different scenarios do I have? And then once you decided on it, you can do a more specific, more detailed analysis of your current landscape from a business capability perspective, from an application perspective, but also from a process perspective. And this is where we would say, okay, now that we have the priorities ready, we know where we want to invest, where we want to change certain processes. We have this more other cycle that we go through once more and once more and once more, and then jump back into LeanIX and document all the relevant changes. And what I want to highlight here again, it's I think for a successful transformation, change management and transparency is a key priority. You need to be aware, how does your landscape, your IT and business landscape look like? And the combination of Signavio and LeanIX really give you the transparency into this. And these are my final words. And if you want to have a more detailed walkthrough, if you want to have a more detailed demo, or if you just want to have more information on the approach, then please feel to reach out to either JP from Signavio or Timo Wild as our head of SAP practice group at LeanIX. And if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them into the Q&A, and we're more than happy to take them now. Yeah, JP, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I will add just the final word on the previous slide, if you don't mind, because I think it's a very powerful, actually 1 + 1 = 3 type of approach that you, and thanks a lot for bringing all the benefits. At Signavio, SAP today, what we like to pitch is this concept of, an end-to-end transformation involves many artifacts, not only people and process, but also system, strategy, compliance, risk, and so on. So there is a lot of complexity, right? And we need to bring this visibility to tame uncertainty. And we all know that uncertainty is not something that we like when we do such transformation. So the idea is, beyond extending our scope by putting Signavio on steroids in a certain extent, because we are helping us to actually add some artifacts such as capabilities, systems, data, etc. We also help to embrace these double loops, right? So we like to use this statement about from a seamless transformation. So that's actually the first loop that you see on the left-hand side, right? So that's the first loop where you're going to do the work between LeanIX and Signavio to deliver on time, on quality, and on budget. As soon as we do that, we don't want to stop there. We want to actually transition this new optimized process, this new optimized capability into this augmentation and optimization phase. So that's what we like, is from a seamless transformation to operational excellence, right? So that's really what we do, is to make sure we capitalize on this S/4HANA transformation, not only to say, hey, we deliver everything on time, on quality, and on budget, everybody is happy, is to leverage that to carry on the continuous improvements mindset and DNA. And together, LeanIX and Signavio, we really, strengthen this message, and we make people able to make that not only for the transformation, but for the next year as well. So that was my very long additional comment. So sorry about that, JT.
That's all right. Okay, good.
Couple of questions here, actually. I think there is one that came a lot, is this concept of integration, right? To know more about the connector.
Yeah, sure. And that's a question that we hear quite regularly. So how does this actually work? How do I connect LeanIX and Signavio, and how seamlessly and easily is it to set it up? And we actually have some slides on that. Give me 1 second. Oh, there we go. So the integration to Signavio from a LeanIX perspective is out of the box. So really all you need to do is provide your username and your password, and in some cases your workspace ID, and then just hit save and you're ready to go. You can also specify how you want to sync between those two applications. If it's ad hoc, if it's interval based, you can specify what system is the leading system. Well, naturally, it would be Signavio, of course, for processes, applications, user groups, and business capabilities, LeanIX as leading system. But that's really something you can define yourself. You can specify if you only want to sync certain processes or certain applications between a system. So you really have a lot of flexibility you can leverage here when setting up the integration. And as mentioned earlier, it normally doesn't take you longer than 5 to 10 minutes to implement it. All right. Okay. Checking the Q&A.
Yeah, maybe I can take the one regarding how we connect with the system, because obviously process mining is quite powerful in this demonstration, right? So just to make it clear, so we have out of the box connectors with a couple of systems. Obviously SAP is part of it, right? So we can connect our process mining capability to ECC or S/4HANA system, but not only, we can also connect with other type of ERPs. So the idea is the connector will plug with the event logs, create the data model transfer, if you will, to create a data set. But there is another way, which is much more tactical, that we use a lot during a POC, POV, or pilot, whatever you call it, is this concept of we're going to tell you what we need in terms of information. So usually the bare essential is transaction ID, event name, and timestamp. That's the very essential. Everything else is contextual, so we take it, but it's contextual. So if you provide a report, an extract of your system with this information, we can import that very easily as a data set and apply process mining. So that's the way it's working. And obviously you can orchestrate and schedule to run process mining every month or every quarter, right? Because you certainly don't want to run it only one time, right? You want to apply this end-to-end assessment over time to keep the alignment.
Okay, thanks a lot, JP. And looking at the Q&A, we have another question asking if we have pre-built templates in LeanIX for SAP and S/4HANA to build something like we showed in the live demo. Yes, we do. What we have is in our documentation and user docs some pre-built templates that you can leverage for your own modeling, which you can use as a starting point. And then I guess let's say if you wanted to have a brief overview of the workspace that we just showed, just feel free to approach your customer success manager, or if you're not a customer, feel free to mention it during the sales process. I think everyone involved from our side is more than happy to share the workspace that we prepared for this. Okay, another one. JP, do you have another one on Signavio? Just looking at.
So I did actually answer a couple of them, right, while you were speaking. So maybe because I received a couple of emails before, right, the webinar. So the integration, that was one part of it, and the second one was, the scope of the migration, right, with LeanIX and Signavio. So I mean, the question was, do we need to actually start with everything and manage everything in terms of IT system, processes, etc., or we can start and crawl, walk, run approach? So I hope during the demonstration you saw, you decide the scope, right? You can actually try to focus on one specific capability or master capability and handle that at first. And you're going to configure your connector between LeanIX and Signavio only on this specific scope, right, to run the sync. So that's quite interesting, because that can help you to, start with a small scope, show the value, show it's a really big catalyst for your change management. And I can guarantee you, when people's going to start using it and to see how you shorten the time to value, they're going to carry on using it for other scope, and you're going to start, expanding your repository, adding new system, adding new process, and making this transformation engine your, operational excellence platform, combining LeanIX and Signavio together. So I just wanted to once again answer that. That was more an offline question.
Okay, thanks a lot. Looking at the questions, I think we have another one. If you want to use our tools in a strategic assessment, how much will it cost? So I think that's an information that really depends on certain attributes and certain factors. But if you want to have a better understanding how much it would cost, please feel free to either reach out to JP or Timo. They can provide you some more detailed information afterwards. I think that's the best way to approach this. Okay.
So we had a question regarding the notation. So I did answer it offline, but just to make it clear for everybody. So with Signavio, we do support a couple of notations from customer journey maps, BPMN, DMN, Archimate, UML, right? So the beauty of it is that beyond supporting them, we also support you in connecting them together. So literally, you can start with a customer journey map, see where you've got touch points that are important in terms of customer experience, drill down to the underlying process, see the different decision in DMN, and even drill down into the Archimate to see what are the systems that are supporting all that. And guess what? The system into the Archimate will be system managed by LeanIX, because they are the master of data for this component. So that's all these artifacts are actually articulated.
Great, thank you. And maybe another one, how to integrate the tools to SAP systems. And I can answer this from a LeanIX perspective. So there are different options. So of course, option number one is integrating with Signavio as it is SAP or an SAP system. We have some pre-built connectors to SAP PIPO provided by our partners. We have just recently added some new capabilities for the whole part of auto discovery of SaaS applications, where we link into different SAP systems such as SAP S for Hana, Cloud, SAP Business by Design, SAP Cloud Platform, and many more. And then again, we also have our very flexible integration API, where you can always build your own integrations to SAP systems, really tailored to your own specific requirements. And I think, having that said, maybe JP, do you want to add some final words as we're approaching the full hour?
So the final word is thanks a lot on behalf of the Signavio team to LeanIX and also everybody who has joined this webinar. I hope you are as excited as we are of connecting the dot between business process management and enterprise architecture for this very specific transformation, which is S for Hana. So thanks a lot for joining. Very appreciated.
And same, I couldn't have it said better. I really enjoyed working together with you, JP, and also presenting this very interesting use case. And really thanks a lot for the great questions, for your attendance, and really looking forward to drive this topic even further. And yeah, hopefully see everyone soon in real life, and stay healthy.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.
Yeah, bye-bye.